Hello everyone, and welcome to 404s of the World, a spin-off series of remarkable engines where I briefly cover the history of an engine numbered 404 in 4 minutes and 4 seconds. In this episode, we'll be covering a small switcher that works for the mighty Southern Railway and later became the star of a small tourist railroad under a different number. Even though there aren't too many photos of this engine in its original Southern number or its original railroad, it's still part of an influential class of early EMD switchers. So without further ado, here is the story of Southern Railway 404. After proving their success on the switching yards of the Class 1s, the diesel locomotives soon became widespread among not only the main lines, but also on branch lines and smaller Class 2 and 3 railroads at a much later date. Likewise, these smaller railroads usually purchased smaller and cheaper engines that not only shunted freight cars, but even hauled a few local runs, as our engine of focus is the EMD SW1, one of the first diesel switchers to be sold en masse with 661 built starting in 1939, and our railroad of focus is the Atlantic and East Carolina Railway running from Goldsboro to Beaufort, North Carolina, who purchased a grand total of one SW1 and numbered it number 9, which also happens to be our locomotive of focus for this episode as number 9 was built towards the end of its class in April of 1947. Number 9 was one of only 8 diesels on the roster at the time, as there honestly isn't too much known about this engine, but during the 50s, many small railroads were especially hit hard by competition from trucks, which forced many of them to shut down or be merged. The Eastern Carolina was one of the lucky ones, as the railroad became an operating subsidiary of the Southern Railway in 1958, as its trackage still remains active to this day. While upon its acquisition, all of the rolling stock was painted in the Southern Railway tuxedo livery and was renumbered with AENC lettering on their cabs. Number 9 was no exception, as the switcher was soon repainted and renumbered to 404, as the switcher along with the other AENC engines were known to be the cleanest and best maintained engines on the Southern system when they arrived for repainting when compared to the engines from other small railroads that the Southern acquired. Despite the somewhat recent acquisition, this switcher wouldn't remain in its newly given Southern number for long, as 404 was renumbered to 1007 in 1973, but it managed to be one of the 4 SW1s that lasted in the Norfolk Southern in 1982. Impressively, 1007 still kept its A and EC lettering on its cab, since the Eastern Carolina Railroad was still a subsidiary of Southern and therefore NS until 2003. The engine could be found in the shunting yards across the NS system, as it was one of the last SW1s in revenue service until its retirement in 2003, where it was briefly used on the Lexington and Ohio Railroad, before being purchased by the Knoxville and Holston River Railroad in Knoxville, Tennessee, who restored it to its previous Southern tuxedo livery. Here, although no longer number 404, this engine pulled various tourist and local freight runs for the Shortline Railroad along with sister Southern SW1 number 1002, until a blown prime mover rendered the mighty switcher out of service and likely stored since 2014. Despite its short time as number 404, this engine also made its way into model form with an O-gauge model of 404 by MTH, and a Z-scale model of 1007 during its NS years by Gerard Huet, as this engine's little known yet long career is more than enough to prove the diligence of this early EMD switcher. Thank you again for watching. Credit for all the photos used go to their respective photographers, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Have a good day.